The stars in the Zithal galaxy were silent, their light flickering like distant memories, far removed from the chaos unfolding below. Sera Nova sat alone in the cockpit of her starship, the Vigilance, her eyes fixed on the holographic map that glowed in front of her. Aurelia was a beautiful planet, its green valleys and tall mountain ranges a testament to what once was, before the war, before the Dominion's reach spread like a stain across the galaxy. But now, it was more than that. It was humanity's last hope. A series of notifications pinged through the comms system, breaking the silence. Sera didn't flinch. Her fingers flew across the console, scanning through the intelligence reports. Every detail, every calculation, every transmission needed her attention. It was a steady rhythm now, tuning out everything else and focusing on the present. The war was no longer a distant threat, it had arrived at their doorstep. The Dominion fleet was on its way. She leaned back in her seat, allowing the weight of the news to settle in. Zarak Thule, the Supreme General of the Xarn Dominion, had mobilized his forces. The invasion of Aurelia was inevitable. His arrogance made it seem like an afterthought, a mere formality to wipe out what he saw as insignificant resistance. The Dominion had underestimated humanity for years, but this time, it would cost them. A soft voice broke the stillness. "Sera, it's time." It was Jace. He'd been with her since the beginning, since she had fled the Federation, since she had decided that humanity's survival depended on more than just conventional strategies. He was more than a friend. He was the one who kept her grounded when the weight of the war threatened to break her. "Let's begin, then," Sera replied. She didn't look up, not yet. The plan was already in motion, and there was no turning back. She activated the ship's comms to broadcast a signal across the encrypted channels. "Everyone, listen up," she said, her voice steady but cold. "The Xarn fleet is inbound. We don't have the luxury of waiting for reinforcements. This is our fight. We hold the line here, on Aurelia, or we lose everything. We've been preparing for this moment for years. Now, we act. Get to your stations, and make every shot count." There was a brief silence before the team responded. A chorus of acknowledgements echoed through the ship's channels, each voice filled with determination. Sera stood and walked toward the rear of the ship, her boots clicking softly against the metal floor. The Vigilance wasn't much, a stripped-down ship meant for stealth and speed, built for missions like this. She entered the small war room, where her team had already gathered. They were ready. Jace stood near the map display, his face set in grim resolve. "What's the plan?" he asked, the uncertainty in his eyes betraying his calm demeanor. "We've trained for this," Sera replied, her voice unwavering. "We're not here to win a traditional battle. We're here to make them bleed. We hit their flanks, stay mobile, and use the terrain to our advantage. We know their patterns. We know how they think. This won't be about strength, it'll be about surprise, strategy, and using the weapon we've been hiding." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Aurelia's weapon?" Sera nodded, her gaze darkening. The weapon buried deep within the planet's core was their last resort, a piece of technology so powerful it could wipe out an entire fleet in seconds. But it was also unstable, unpredictable. If they unleashed it without caution, the planet itself could be destroyed. "We'll need to buy time," she said. "The fleet's coming in fast. We'll need to keep Zarak distracted long enough to deploy it. Once it's activated, we have minutes, seconds, maybe, to make sure it doesn't consume everything." Jace's lips pressed into a thin line. "Understood." The tension in the room was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. They were about to go up against an army that had crushed entire civilizations without breaking a sweat. But Sera knew something they didn't. She knew that humanity had one thing the Xarn Dominion could never account for: heart. She turned to the group, each of them standing in perfect silence. "Everyone on this ship knows what's at stake. If we don't win today, humanity ends. The Federation's broken, the colonies are lost, and we're the last line of defense. We either make history today, or we fade into nothing." The group nodded in agreement. They understood. Sera left the war room and made her way to the cockpit. Jace followed closely behind, his presence a constant reminder of the bond they shared. She had never doubted her decision to fight this war, never questioned the sacrifices it would demand. But now, as she stared at the cold void of space through the cockpit's window, she felt something stir inside her. It was the weight of the moment, the knowledge that this was their final stand. "Serac thinks we're weak," she muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "He doesn't understand humanity's strength. He'll learn soon enough." Jace didn't respond. He didn't need to. The comms pinged again. This time, it was a transmission from Serac himself. The arrogance in his voice was unmistakable, even through the encrypted feed. "Nova," Serac's voice crackled over the comms, "you've been a thorn in my side for too long. It's time for your extinction. Prepare for your final moments. We will erase you from history." Sera smiled. "Not today, Serac. Not today." She switched off the comms, her resolve hardening. She was no longer just fighting for survival. She was fighting for something bigger, something the Dominion could never understand. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Sera turned to face her crew. "Let's show them what happens when you underestimate humanity." The Vigilance shot forward into the abyss of space, her crew poised for the battle ahead. The Dominion fleet was coming. But so was humanity's reckoning. And they were ready. The first sign that the battle had begun was the tremor in the ship's hull. A low, grinding hum echoed through the Vigilance, the sound of her engines working overtime as they cut through the vacuum of space. Sera Nova sat at the controls, eyes locked onto the holographic display. The Xarn fleet was here, approaching fast, their sleek warships swarming toward Aurelia like vultures drawn to a carcass. "Target lock engaged," Jace's voice broke through the tension. He was at his station, fingers dancing over the console, eyes darting between the screens. The Vigilance was ready, the sleek craft's weapon systems primed for the assault. "Stay sharp," Sera muttered, her voice calm but laced with intensity. "We'll hit them before they even realize we're here." Jace nodded, though the tension in his jaw told a different story. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. But Sera knew something Serac didn't. The Xarn may have the strength, but humanity had the will. "Vanguard Squadron, initiate Phase 1, Sera commanded, tapping a sequence into the console. The ship's comms crackled as the orders were relayed to the rest of their small fleet, a handful of ragtag ships, each smaller and less powerful than Serac's armada, but deadly in their own right. Sera turned to the display. Her fleet, 3 small vessels in total, had split into 2 formations. One group would take the brunt of the Dominion's fire, distracting their enemy, while the second would maneuver into position for a surprise strike. It was risky, but they had no choice. "Phase 1, confirmed," Jace called out. The first volley of enemy fire lit up the stars. Bright beams of plasma rained down from the Dominion fleet, targeting the nearest of Sera's ships, the Echo. The smaller ship didn't stand a chance. Its shields flared brightly before failing, and within moments, the vessel erupted in a fiery explosion that sent a shockwave through space. "Damn it," Sera hissed, gripping the console harder. The Echo was gone, its crew lost to the void. But this wasn't the time to mourn, there was no room for regret in battle. She had made the decision, and it had to pay off. "Phase 2, she ordered. The Vigilance surged forward, the sleek ship darting through space like a predator on the hunt. Behind them, the remaining ships followed suit, each one weaving between asteroids and debris to avoid being a stationary target. "Serac is going to regret this," Jace muttered, barely able to suppress his anger. The Dominion's arrogance had cost them, and they had to make it count. The next few minutes were a blur of fire and maneuvering. The Dominion ships were massive, but their speed and precision left something to be desired. Sera had been tracking them for weeks, learning their tactics, their weaknesses. She knew their patterns better than they did. The Vigilance cut through the chaos, ducking behind an asteroid field that had been strategically placed for just this moment. The Dominion fleet, believing they had Sera cornered, followed her lead, plowing straight into the asteroid belt. The rocks collided with their ships, sending fragments scattering across space. One Dominion destroyer, too slow to react, took a direct hit, its shields collapsing under the pressure. The ship exploded in a fiery cloud, marking the first real victory of the battle. "Got one!" Jace shouted, his voice filled with exhilaration. They didn't see it coming. "Keep it up," Sera urged, her eyes focused on the unfolding chaos. The battle was far from over, and they were still heavily outmatched. She checked the fleet's status. Both remaining ships were taking hits, but their evasive maneuvers were working. They were doing the impossible, holding their ground. But then, the worst-case scenario materialized. A massive Xarn flagship, the Oblivion, broke through the debris field, its massive weapon systems charging. The ship was twice the size of any of Sera's vessels, bristling with firepower, and it was coming straight at them. "Pull back!" Sera ordered, her voice urgent. The Vigilance veered sharply, dodging the incoming fire from the Oblivion's turrets. The other two ships followed, barely managing to avoid the incoming blasts. "They're targeting us," Jace warned, his fingers flying across the console. "Shields are weakening. We can't take much more of this." Sera gritted her teeth. They couldn't retreat, they couldn't let Xarn think they were running. "Activate the disruptors," she commanded. Jace's hands moved quickly, activating the ship's experimental weapon. A low hum filled the cockpit, and then, without warning, a pulse of energy shot from the Vigilance, directed straight at the Oblivion. The Xarn flagship's shields flickered and sputtered before collapsing entirely. The Oblivion's massive hull shuddered as the disruptor blast tore through its systems. The flagship's power systems went dark, and for a brief moment, Sera felt the weight of the battle shift in their favor. "Direct hit!" Jace exclaimed, relief flooding his voice. But Sera's expression remained unreadable. The Oblivion wasn't out of the fight yet. It was a monster, and no single strike could take it down. She knew Xarn wouldn't let his flagship fall so easily. "Get us close," she ordered, her voice calm but commanding. "We're going to finish this now." With the Oblivion temporarily disabled, Sera pushed the Vigilance into full speed, the ship's engines roaring as they closed the gap between them and the enemy flagship. The next move would be critical. "You sure about this?" Jace asked, glancing at her. Sera didn't answer immediately. She had no plan B, no backup strategy. This was it. The entire future of humanity could hinge on this single, final act. She was about to make Xarn realize just how far his underestimation of humanity had gone. "I'm sure," she replied. "Let's finish this." The Vigilance barreled towards the Oblivion at full speed, shields flaring as more enemy fire rained down. The two ships were locked in a deadly dance, but Sera knew exactly how this would end. She had one more card to play. "Now," she commanded. The Vigilance's weapons systems roared to life as they came within range of the Oblivion. The final assault began, and the tide of the battle shifted irrevocably. The Xarn fleet was learning what it meant to face humanity when they had nothing left to lose. The universe had gone silent. The constant hum of the Vigilance's engines was drowned out by the suffocating stillness of space. Sera Nova stood at the ship's helm, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the console. Her eyes locked on the massive shadow of the Oblivion, the Xarn flagship, now reeling from their earlier disruptor strike. The damage was extensive, but Xarn wasn't the type to retreat. Not yet. "Shields at 40%, Jace's voice came through the comms, strained but steady. "We can't take another hit like that." "We don't need to," Sera replied quietly, almost to herself. "This ends now." A sudden flash of light cut through the darkness. The Oblivion fired again, its massive cannons unleashing a volley of plasma that streaked toward the Vigilance. The ship's shields flared brightly before buckling under the intense assault. The impact sent a shockwave through the hull, and Sera's grip tightened on the controls. "Brace for impact," she shouted. The ship shuddered violently as another round slammed into the side of the hull, but Sera held steady, not giving an inch. She wasn't about to let this battle slip away now. Her mind was clear, focused on the task at hand. She knew what needed to be done. "Jace, We need to get inside their firing range, she said, her voice calm, a stark contrast to the chaos around them. Can you get us close enough? Trying, Jace replied, his voice tight with concentration. But that thing's massive. I'll need a couple more seconds to adjust. Sera's eyes flicked over to the tactical display. The other ships in her fleet had taken significant damage. Their numbers were dwindling. But there was still one card left to play, Aurelia's weapon. The power hidden beneath the planet's surface, the key to the destruction of the Dominion's forces. But it wouldn't work unless they could buy enough time to activate it. Time was slipping away, and Xarn would soon realize he wasn't dealing with an easy target anymore. We have one shot at this, Sera muttered to herself. She quickly flicked switches on the console, activating the last phase of her plan. Jace, I need you to trust me, she said. I always have, Jace replied, his voice unwavering. The ship's engines roared to life as Sera pushed the vigilance to its limits, sending the ship hurtling toward the oblivion. The massive enemy ship loomed ever closer, its guns charging for another devastating blast. But Sera wasn't going to be a target. Now, she commanded. At the last possible second, Sera executed a sharp, evasive maneuver, sending the vigilance into a spiraling dive. The Xarn flagship's cannons fired too late, and the plasma beams missed by mere inches. The vigilance shot past the oblivion, weaving through its fire as the crew held on for dear life. You're crazy! Jace exclaimed, his voice tinged with both awe and terror. You're insane! Sera didn't reply. Her focus was razor-sharp. She had just one goal, get to Aurelia's core before Xarn realized what was happening. The ship skimmed dangerously close to the oblivion, its massive engines pushing them faster. The Xarn flagship turned, trying to bring its guns to bear, but Sera's precision and speed outpaced their attempts. Rerouting all power to the forward thrusters, Jace said, his hands flying over the console. We've got one chance to break through their defenses. The vigilance streaked across the dark void, heading toward the swirling mass of the planet's atmosphere. Aurelia's core lay beneath, a hidden weapon that could end this war. We're almost there, Sera said, watching the planet's surface draw closer. Get ready to deploy the weapon. Jace's fingers hesitated over the controls, the weight of their next move pressing down on him. Are you sure about this? The weapon, it's not exactly stable. Sera didn't need to hear the rest. It's all we have left. Do it. With that, Jace activated the final sequence, initiating the weapon's core sequence. The ship's hull trembled as the energy from Aurelia's core surged up through the ship's systems, a fierce pulse of raw power that pushed the vigilance forward, closer to the heart of the Dominion fleet. Now, Sera! Jace shouted. We're in position. She didn't hesitate. With a deep breath, Sera pushed the final command, triggering Aurelia's weapon. The planet below rumbled with fury. A blinding burst of light exploded from the surface of Aurelia, streaking upward like a beacon of death. The weapon's pulse shot through space, a devastating wave of energy that struck the Xarn fleet like a hammer. The first wave of ships erupted in a brilliant flash, their shields crumpling under the immense pressure. Then another. And another. The Oblivion was directly in the line of fire, its massive frame absorbing the weapon's blast, its hull shaking with the force of the impact. For a moment, the ship held steady, but only for a moment. The Oblivion's engines sputtered, sparks flying from every exposed surface. But Xarn wasn't finished yet. Deploying backup shields, Jace said, his voice strained as he worked to keep the vigilance steady. We've got to get out of the blast zone. Sera's eyes flicked to the tactical display. The weapon had done its job, Xarn's flagship was crippled, its remaining forces in disarray, but there was one last thing she needed to do. Jace, we're going in. Are you crazy? Jace almost shouted. It's too risky. You'll destroy us. Sera didn't respond, her mind made up. They had one shot to finish this, to end the war once and for all. She steered the vigilance into the heart of the Xarn fleet, watching as ships exploded in front of her, each explosion signaling the end of the Dominion's reign. Hold on, she muttered. The Vigilance surged forward, through the chaos, towards the broken oblivion. Zarak's arrogance had cost him everything. And now, it was time for humanity to claim victory. The final assault was swift. Zarak's flagship, now barely a shadow of its former self, exploded in a fiery inferno as Sera's ship barreled through its core. The remnants of the Dominion fleet scattered like debris, no match for the fury of the weapon. Sera leaned back in her seat, her body exhausted but her mind still razor-sharp. The battle was over. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a breath. "We did it," she whispered. Jace was silent for a moment before replying. "We did. Humanity had won."